So, every IELTS test is going to begin with one of two questions. Today we're going to talk about the first set of those questions that you'll get, and by the end of the video you will have an understanding of the questions and some strategies on how to answer it in the best way possible, a way that is going to set you up for a good score and a good performance on the rest of the test. If you don't know, I am Kevin. I'm a former IELTS examiner and current IELTS teacher. Let's get started. So the first question you get on the IELTS test can be one of two things. This week we're going to be talking about the first set of questions, and those are going to be questions about where you live. Now, the questions may vary from test to test. It may be talking about your town or your apartment or flat or house, but it will always be about where you live, about the surrounding areas, about the things you like. You have a 50% chance of getting this question in part one, so you must know how to answer it. And there are certain strategies we can use to give the best answer we can give. Now, you may be asking, why is this so important? It's just one question on the test. That is true, but it's also the first question your examiner is going to ask you, and it's the first time your examiner is hearing you speak. And I can tell you from giving the IELTS test, from that first question and your first answer, I am already putting you in certain boxes. Is this person a band 5 or a band 6 or a band 7 or a band 8? Is the entire test marked from this question? No, of course not. But it is the first time you speak and the first time I hear you, and that makes it very important. So, as I said, your examiner is going to say something like, for this first part of the test, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about where you live. Do you, for example, live in an apartment or a house? Or perhaps they may say, what is your hometown? Either way, there's going to be some very common follow-ups. If we're talking about your house, I might ask you to describe your house. I might ask you what your favorite room is. I might ask you, is there anything you would change about your house? If I'm talking about your hometown, I might ask you questions about the things in your hometown. Do you want to live in your hometown forever? Is your hometown a good place for tourists? They are all going to be focused on that first question, and it's usually 95% of the time about your house or your hometown. Now, I often hear from my students that these are really simple questions, and because they're simple, it is hard for them to think of what to say. So I'm going to give you a technique for both these questions and also other part one questions, because it really fits in well with the type of questions that are asked in part one. The technique is the triple S technique. That is state, support, and specific example. State your thought, give it a supporting sentence, and give a specific example. Let's put it into practice. For example, if the question is, where do you live now? I may say, I live in Hanoi. It's the capital of Vietnam. It's a busy place, but there's usually a lot of fun things to do. For example, I like to meet my friends at local cafes. I stated, I supported, I gave a specific example. It's not super long, but there is some good complexity there, and of course you can use more advanced and precise vocabulary if you know it. Also, this answer is much better than two other types of answers I hear. I will hear very simplistic answers. I live in Hanoi. It's the capital of Vietnam. That is simply not enough. On the other side of that is I will hear a rambling answer. Ramble is a good word for someone who keeps talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, but without a point, without a topic. They're just throwing words at you. Sometimes, especially lower level students, think the more they speak, the better, which is kind of true. But remember, we want to stay on topic. And if you're rambling, you often go off topic, and that can hurt your coherence score. I do have some useful tips for you when you're answering these questions. Now, remember, you're talking about what you're doing now, so frequently you are going to be using the present simple tense or the present continuous. I live in Hanoi, or I am living in Hanoi, or maybe a mixture of the two. Also, you want to avoid giving those very short sentences. I live in Hanoi. It is busy. It is polluted. I live in Hanoi, a big city in the north of Vietnam, and although it's quite polluted, it's still quite a lovely place. The second one is so much better. Finally, in answering these questions, you want to avoid repeating the same adjectives over and over and over again. Yes, it's part one. Yes, we want to keep our answers very focused, but don't be lazy and use repetitive adjectives and simple words. If you are fluent enough to drop in precise vocabulary or advanced vocabulary, please do. Let's do some practical examples here. I'm going to give you a question, and I want you to pause the video for 10 seconds, prepare for 10 seconds, and then say your answer out loud, and try to use the triple S method. State, support, specific example. The first question is, where do you live now? My response would be, I live in the Long Bien district of Hanoi. I like it because it's not too busy, despite being really close to the old city. For example, there's never really a traffic jam on my street in Long Bien because the roads are nice and modern and there's just not as many people here. State, support, specific example. Second question, let's do the same thing. 10 seconds to prepare, and then speak your answer out loud. Would you like to live there in the future? I don't think I'd like to live here in the future. I'm ready for a quieter city on the beach. For example, Da Nang or Quy Nhon are supposed to be beautiful cities, and I think I'd like to move there. State, support, specific example. It's not so hard, is it? And it helps you build a tight, focused answer. And you can still play and have fun with your answers as well. So, now you know one of the most common Part 1 IELTS questions. Tell me, where do you live? Leave your response in the comments below, and I'll leave my feedback. Until next time, happy studies.